The empire of a billionaire collapsed at the very moment a maid's 12-year-old daughter dared to speak. High above Chicago, Grant Blackwell, the self-proclaimed king of the skyline, smiled as his Japanese guest prepared to sign the contract that would lock in his crown. The glass penthouse wasn't a home. It was a declaration. Walls of glass embraced the sky. Italian rugs stretched smooth as still-water leather sofas gleamed, and abstract paintings hung like invisible price tags. No one noticed the small girl pressed into the corner, Abby Riley Black, 12 years old, clutching her faded backpack tight to her chest. Here she was a shadow in a polished world of power. But with a single page, a single line, everything would crack. That morning should have been Monica Riley's day off. Abby's mother worked for a service company, always taking the toughest shifts, still drowning in debt after her husband's death. Then came the urgent call from Blackwell's house manager. The fateful meeting with the Japanese investor, $2 billion regular staff out, need a stand-in. There's a bonus. That bonus was spark enough to strike a match in a dark room. For Monica, it was worth trading a day's rest. And so mother and daughter rose in the elevator, watching the city shrink beneath them like a glittering map. Abby clutched her backpack, a water bottle, a half-eaten apple, and a battered old book of Japanese folk tales. Her grandfather, Walter Riley, had taught her hiragana katakana, then kanji not to show off, but to understand the heart of a people where words and honor breathe. To Abby, the book was a warm hiding place in cold spaces and a thread tying her to the grandfather she'd lost. She tied her curly hair into 2 braids, the worn elastic looped around her wrist, a simple reminder. Stay calm. Breathe and count to 3. The elevator opened, spilling money-scented air laced with leather and floral luxury. Victoria Blackwell glided over, sculpted from ice hair, immaculate smile, never touching her eyes, arms glittering with diamonds. Her gaze dropped to Monica's worn shoes, then flicked to Abby. 2 minutes late. This is a $2 billion deal. Everything must be perfect. What is that child yours? She has no place here. Monica shivered at the command. Do not disrupt the air of power. She tugged her daughter's hand, whispering, Stay in the kitchen. Don't touch anything. Speak only if asked. The survival rules of houses that never belonged to them. The living room was a living museum, furniture, placed with compass-precision light, carved across every pane of glass. Abby felt her faded shirt like the wrong costume on the wrong stage. She watched quietly, half curious, half shrinking, when Chase Blackwell 20 lounged on the sofa, his eyes flicking at her backpack. He tossed out a line half joke, half sneer, brought your crayons to play. The laughter dripped sharp enough to sting without leaving a bruise. Microaggressions, violence in whispers carried on expensive perfume, faint but impossible to ignore. Grant entered with his power smile, the kind honed through hundreds of closing rooms. He strode forward, voice deep as a drum, commanding the air with soft imperatives. The doorbell chimed. Kenji Tanaka stepped in small, suited, composed, flanked by 2 aides and Ethan Clark, his American interpreter. Kenji bowed slightly, his smile refined but unreadable, his calm sliced through the glare of the room like a cool breeze. Monica slipped into motion, polishing the steel counters, arranging glasses, testing trays, checking champagne. She handed Abby a tray of empty glasses, set it on the side table. Then come back a small task, but enough to carry her across the stage of power for a few breaths. Abby placed the tray, lifted her eyes, and saw the bilingual contract waiting on the glass table, each English page mirrored by Japanese, bound in leather, a golden fountain pen resting like a gleaming blade. Her eyes swept the kanji, the familiar characters glowing in her mind. She didn't fully read, not yet, only a glance, but enough to spark a chill down her spine she couldn't yet name. Victoria drifted among the guests, showing off a Rothko like others flaunt profit charts. Chase lobbed his superior jokes, and Grant spread his smile wide at Kenji. No need for many words. The numbers speak for themselves. Before the signing ceremony began, the sides were drawn, money speed command on one, legacy partnership honor on the other. Between them stood Ethan, the trusted bridge of words, and Abby, a shadow assumed irrelevant. This story would prove every system of power has its blind spot, and often that blind spot ignores the one who sees most clearly. As crystal glasses chimed, as well-timed laughter scattered, the overture was set. The $2 billion ship was ready to depart. Only the signature remained. But with just a few words, that ship would veer off course before its rudder ever turned. The shift of power began the moment Kenji uncapped the pen. The Tanaka delegation took their seats. Kenji spoke slowly, short phrases, polished tone. He emphasized words like partnership, legacy, trust when discussing through the interpreter his vision. Grant, meanwhile, chose verbs like dominate, optimize, capture, market share. Two linguistic poles collided through Ethan Clark, who was simply doing the well-paid job of making it all sound like alignment. In meetings like this, rhythm mattered as much as numbers. If rhythm held the weaker side, would feel like a guest. If rhythm cracked, the language of power had to yield to the real issue. Victoria continued her art tour, pausing at an abstract canvas, addressing one of Kenji's Japanese aides with lofty superiority. This piece is worth more than your car, probably your entire apartment too. The man only bowed not in agreement, but in the courtesy of a culture that avoids confrontation in another's space. From the edges of the frame, Abby saw a knot tightening, courtesy being mistaken for weakness, silence being exploited as a license to trample. Monica glided through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes, each step a perfect balance. In rooms like this, walking was its own exam. You didn't avoid spills only for the stain, but for dignity. Chase rose casually, drifting half a step off course, just enough to block her path. Monica halted. Drops of champagne splashed on the Italian rug. Careful. That rug costs more than your annual salary. Chase sneered, eyes glittering with cheap power. From across the room, Victoria's voice sliced like a pin clumsy. Monica bent down, face hidden behind a napkin. Her hands kept the tray, steady instinct born of years working in rooms where mistakes were never allowed. Kenji noticed. He set his glass down untouched. A small gesture, but it meant something: observation, disapproval, a fraction of goodwill withdrawn. In negotiations, it isn't just price and terms. There's a moral audit, two tiny details in how the powerless are treated. Abby registered that glass placed down the way she marked commas and periods in Japanese text, silent, yet altering the tone of the whole line. In that moment, her grandfather's voice echoed, "Geary duty honor. Your words are the rope that ties your name." She caught the faint scent of coconut oil from her braids, felt the elastic brush her wrist, and realized in this room everyone spoke. He with money. She with designer brands, that man with numbers. Only her mother was never allowed to speak. And the language Abby carried, Japanese, might be the one voice this room could not ignore. The thought flashed like a blade, faded, then settled deep near her core. Grant adjusted his smile, tugged the rhythm back. "I think we've said enough. The numbers speak for themselves. Let's sign and celebrate, shall we?" He gestured. The aide placed the bilingual contract on the glass table, open to the final page. Ethan nodded slightly. The Japanese version matches the English exactly. It's just procedure. Just procedure dropped onto the floor like a velvet-covered trap. Kenji uncapped the golden fountain pen. The light struck its barrel, a thin glint like a blade. Abby had been sent to collect empty glasses around the table. She was close enough to glance sideways at the Japanese column near the end. The kanji rose like familiar signposts. She found herself reading silently before realizing it. The English spoke in foggy phrasing. The parties shall mutually review positions in accordance with market fluctuations. But the Japanese carved it open if any region's market dropped more than 5%. Even outside the project, all Tanaka subsidiary assets would be seized as collateral and transferred to full administrative control of Blackwell Global. This wasn't a translation nuance. It was intent. Monica looked up, caught Abby's frozen stare, and squeezed her daughter's hand in alarm. Chase followed her gaze, smirking. "Sorry, kid, grown-up papers. Don't have pictures," Grant growled. "Helen, Monica, take the girl out." The room held its breath. Kenji's pen hovered above the line not yet touching his eyes, sliding toward Abby in a silent question. "What did you see?" In that hair-thin instant, all the unwritten laws class race age tightened around Abby's throat. She could swallow them the way she always had in school hallways on buses in their damp old apartment. Or she could speak using the language of honor her grandfather had placed carefully in her hands. The elastic snapped lightly against her wrist. She drew a deep breath. Kenji's nib kissed the line. And Abby, still a 12-year-old black girl in a faded shirt, opened her mouth. Kenji Tanaka's fountain pen had just brushed the thin line on the final page when Abby Riley, a 12-year-old black girl in a faded shirt, lifted her chin and said almost to herself, "That's not what it says." Her voice was so soft it shouldn't have shaken anything yet. The entire room seemed drained of air. Grant Blackwell froze mid-smile. Victoria faltered on her heels. Chase tilted his head, a half-smirk hanging unsaid. Monica, startled, clutched her daughter's hand instinct, pulling them back into the silence they knew too well. Kenji set the pen down on the glass table, leaning slightly forward. He didn't look at Grant, nor at the faces waiting for a laugh to smooth things over. He looked at the small girl by the table, empty tray still in her hands. He asked in Japanese voice low, and even like a man accustomed to opening doors with words, "What did you just say?" Abby bowed slightly, answering in Japanese too. Flawless keigo her grandfather had drilled into her, "Moshiwake gozaimasen, osawagase itashimashita." The syllables landed perfectly, far too composed for a 12-year-old. Sweat gathered on interpreter Ethan Clark's brow, as though a surgical lamp had been swung onto him. Kenji gave the smallest nod, eyes still fixed on Abby. "Can you show me where it differs?" he asked, still in Japanese. Abby inhaled, set the tray on the edge of the table, and pointed to the Japanese column on the penultimate page. She read aloud, her voice clear and steady, the cadence of Japanese rolling through a room that had just been filled with titles and luxury. 利をいずれかの市場が 4% 以上。シェアルした場合、本国銀と無関係であっても、転社側の子会社資産は担保として許諾され、ブラックウェルグローバルの完全な管理権限に一貫される。When she finished, she lifted her head and spoke in English for those who could not follow. It says, if any region's market falls more than 5%, even if unrelated to this deal, all Tanaka subsidiary assets will be seized as collateral and transferred to the complete administrative control of Blackwell Global. She placed her finger on the English column opposite the dense lines, deliberately fogged. This side only says, the parties will review positions in accordance with market shifts. No mention of collateral, no mention of complete administrative control. The silence thickened, sticky as tar. Grant snapped a magician caught with the scarf snatched from his hand. Ridiculous, a child making things up. Helen Monica, get her out. Now. The word now cracked, landing beside the clink of Victoria's ring against a glass. Chase snorted, tossing a barb just loud enough kid grown-up papers don't have cartoons. Kenji still looked only at Abby. Who taught you, he asked in Japanese. My grandfather Abby replied, still polite. He said, "Honor lives in words, and here the words are clear." Ethan swallowed hard. He knew he stood at the thinnest point of the bridge where every word would place him on a shore he couldn't return from. Kenji turned to him, switching to English so all could hear, "Did you translate this section correctly?" "Mr. Clark." 5 seconds stretched like 5 minutes. Grant's glare shot at Ethan heavy as a threat. Ethan stammered, I'm sorry." He wiped sweat from his temple. "I took 20,000. They said it was just a small adjustment. They said the Japanese side would trust the English." Monica squeezed her daughter's hand. Abby stood still, eyes locked on the page. The glass walls, the $1,000,000 paintings, Italian rugs, leather chairs, all of it receded behind that timid confession. Grant slammed his palm on the table. "Coward, I'll erase you from this industry." He lurched a half-step toward Monica and Abby, barking, "And you get out of my house, bringing your brat to wreck my $2 billion deal. Filthy." A Japanese aide placed his hand flat against Grant's chest. Firm, silent. He didn't shove, but the boundary was clear. Grant froze as if even he heard something crack inside him. Kenji gently placed the pen back in its case, snapped it shut. He spoke in English for the room. "We pause here." Just 3 words yet. The polished blade of the fountain pen seemed already sheathed. Victoria tried to pull composure around her like a shawl. A misunderstanding, that's all. "We'll fix a few lines. No one wants to spoil the celebration." Her smile dropped like a stone. Chase rolled his eyes, tossed out a half-joke, but the room had no laughter left. Kenji looked at Abby, bowing slightly, the Japanese gesture of respect to someone who had done what was right. "You are very brave," he said. "Your mother is very strong." Mother and daughter stood there suddenly visible again, as though lifted from the glass that had kept them unseen. Grant shifted tactics, clinging to his last rope numbers. "Kenji, we're flexible. 2 billion can be 2.2, 2.5. Whatever you need, name it." He spread his hands wide, feigning generosity, though his nails stayed sharp. Kenji didn't answer. He motioned for aides to bring a device at the 2 columns of text side by side. Ethan produced the emails, the exchanges, the files enough to prove the document before them was the same that had been sent. Kenji took the stylus, underlined 4 Japanese phrases, pointed to 4 English counterparts. He didn't explain. He let the words speak. The ones who used to laugh at Chase began avoiding each other's eyes. In rooms like this, when the scent of money faded, the scent of fear rose faster than any perfume. Victoria bit her lip. Chase slumped against his chair, snapping fingers at the air, catching nothing. Kenji closed the device, turned back to Abby, and asked clearly in English, "If we continue, could you read more where needed?" "I think that's enough." Abby replied, small but steady. "The rest, people already understand." Her last words weren't aimed at the text, but at the faces now laid bare. Kenji nodded. Tonight, no signing. His gaze locked on Grant, not angry but cold as iron doors. "We will let the lawyers speak." Then he softened, looking again at Abby. "Your name is Abby Riley. Yes, yes, and your grandfather's name?" He asked as if a name might open another door. Abby blinked, startled by the turn, Walter Riley. The name drifted out light as a leaf touching a pond. Beyond the glass, the city still blazed with light. Inside the room, everything shifted once more, not around $2 billion, but around an old story not yet told. The room shifted shape. The luxurious living room became a place where displays were taken back and respect was laid down. Kenji asked his aide to bring another tablet, open the original files, verify the checksums, and set them side by side. Ethan stood hunched, as if carrying the weight of the collapsed bridge itself. He handed over his phone, showing the email chain with adjustments and confirming the wire transfer. Timestamps, email addresses, transaction IDs scrolled under the aide's fingers. No judgment needed, only record. "Who did you think you were protecting?" Kenji asked, calm. My family." "I thought it was something small," Ethan replied, then faltered, realizing how loud the word small sounded in this room. Kenji did not scold. His gaze held firm, forcing Ethan to see himself. "In Japan, my teacher said sometimes a small thing can tilt an entire life." Grant shifted tactics again. He dropped the power smile, replacing it with the warm familiarity that had rescued him countless times. "Kenji, you know words. They drift. We revise, we sign tonight." I open vintage wine. "Look. 2. 5 billion, no haggling." He extended his hand, a gesture that once made partners bow. This time, no one bowed. Victoria cut in sharply. "And you, Monica, you spilled champagne on the Italian rug. Don't forget that." She clung to a petty flaw to cover the blast crater. Monica lifted her head, meeting her gaze for the first time. I cleaned it. 4 words, thin as thread, but stitching shut an old tear. The woman forced into silence now existed plainly in this room. Chase stepped forward, half astride, eyes flicking to Abby. "Lucky you." One sentence turned 2 billion to ash. Abby didn't answer. She looked down at the floor where the spill had dried. She pictured the pen's tip brushing paper, thought of her grandfather, and the nights of kanji under yellow lamplight, his warm hand steadying her back when she missed a beat. She didn't feel triumphant. She only felt right. Kenji turned away from the Blackwell storm. He walked to Abby, and Monica bowed properly, deep enough to honor, brief enough not to burden. "You are very brave," he told Abby. "Your mother taught you well." Monica squeezed her daughter's hand, her head inclining gently. In that moment, Abby realized the shift of words from the girl to you, from the maid to mother. A soft click, Ethan slipped the aide's business card into his pocket. The aide spoke slowly, clearly. "If you fully cooperate, tell the entire truth, there may be work for you elsewhere. Not now. You will still face what you must. But the door isn't shut." Ethan nodded, eyes red, as if grasping a new breath to hold on to. Grant staggered like a man stepping out of a pressure chamber. He searched for allies. The ones who had toasted him now avoided his gaze. The smell of fear replaced the smell of money. "Kenji, we've been friends for years. The press will smell blood if you pull out. Blackwell Global is already fragile." He forced a smile wrong in its place. "Be reasonable." Kenji shook his head slowly. "I withdraw, not for the press. I withdraw because I saw how you treat those without power in your own house and because of your words." He turned to his aide. "Back this version up, send to the lawyers." The word lawyers landed like a red seal. Victoria barked into her phone, spitting the crisis lexicon coordinate media statement. Chase shouted at his parents, his voice shattering like glass. The cold beauty of the penthouse now served as backdrop to a family play no one had rehearsed. Grant tried to command again, but the only command left was Kenji's silence. Kenji turned back to Abby as if recalling an unanswered question. "Walter Riley," he repeated softly, his English stretched smooth. "Did your grandfather ever tell war stories?" The strange question stilled even Victoria's shouting, even Chase's tapping heel. Grant blinked, baffled why a $2 billion deal had veered into an alley so unexpected. "He told many," Abby said, voice small. "He was in Okinawa, he was wounded. Once, he said he saw a Japanese student with sad eyes." She stopped unconsciously, tugging the elastic at her wrist. "He said that boy taught him that. Between two sides, there's still a place called human." Kenji drew in a long breath, his eyes darkening as if an old door had opened. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet. From a hidden slot, he drew a yellowed black and white photograph. He held it with both hands, lifting it like a story. "I want you to see this," he said quietly, "but not here." His glance flicked to Grant enough to say some things sacred should not be exposed under expensive lights. Kenji signaled. An aide already stood by the elevator. No signing tonight, he repeated this time as if to the house itself. Then he inclined toward Monica. "I will take you both home." You don't need to," Monica faltered. "We can take the bus." Kenji smiled gently. "Not tonight." Grant rushed after them, his voice tumbling down the steps like a man sliding downhill. "Kenji, you're destroying us. Listen to me, I can fix this, I promise." He thrust his hand out again, trembling. Kenji did not take it. He spoke only to an aide, all further communication through lawyers. The elevator chimed open. Before stepping in, Kenji turned back to Ethan. He gave a small nod. Ethan bowed his head, hands clasped like a man placing the first stone on a long road called atonement. The doors closed, cutting off the clamor inside. In the steel reflection, Abby saw 3 figures, a small Japanese man, a woman with work-worn hands, and a braided girl clutching her old backpack. On it lay the battered book of Japanese folk tales. She pressed her hand against the soft, frayed cover, thinking of her grandfather, and the photograph of the sad-eyed student. Somewhere high above, $2 billion had just slipped from a man's grip. Here, in the descending steel box, something heavier rode with them honor. When the doors opened to the lobby, night had spread a soft golden glow across Chicago. A driver waited booing as he opened the black car. Monica hesitated, then slid in. Abby followed. Kenji sat opposite, resting the photo-laden wallet on his knee, covering it with his hand. He looked at Abby, his voice gentling. "When we arrive, we'll continue talking about Walter Riley." The car rolled away from the glass tower where people believed everything could be bought with a number. And that night, Abby understood some things never sit on a price tag. The car slid out of the garage, swallowing the lobby lights into its dark glass. Inside, it was as still as an abandoned chapel. Monica looked out at the streets, her hands clasped tightly for warmth. Abby hugged her worn backpack, feeling the frayed threads scratch her palm, like a reminder to keep breathing steady. Kenji Tanaka sat opposite, back straight, hands resting lightly on his knees. His gaze lingered between mother and daughter, as though searching for an opening, gentle enough not to spill something fragile. "Walter Riley," he said softly in English, placing the name on the air like a stone on water. "What did your grandfather tell you about Okinawa?" "He told a lot," Abby whispered. "He said he was wounded, thought he wouldn't make it home. He said he met a Japanese student with sad eyes." She hesitated. They couldn't understand each other's words, but they understood the human being. Kenji nodded a deep bow of the head that shifted his dark tie. From his inner pocket, he drew a worn leather wallet, opening a thin flap that felt like it hid a secret. He carefully pulled out a yellowed black and white photo. "This is my family's treasure," he said quietly. He placed it on his palm, turning it toward Abby. 2 young men sat on broken bricks, one Japanese pale-faced, hollow-eyed uniform torn. One American soldier, dust on his face, gentle eyes, cropped hair. They leaned against a crumbling wall, each holding half of a chocolate bar. In the soldier's face, Abby saw something piercingly familiar. Walter Riley, much younger, but undeniably her grandfather. Her hand lifted as if to touch, then stopped. "My grandpa," she murmured. "My grandfather's name was Satoru," Kenji said. "He was a poetry student, drafted at 18. During an artillery strike, he thought he would die until an American soldier pulled him into a ruined house, cleaned his wounds, broke chocolate to share. They sat together for a day, not a single sentence complete. But my grandfather lived. Kenji looked up, his eyes glimmering with something sacred, not sorrow. He carried this photo all his life. He told my father, if you ever meet an American with the name Riley, treat him as family. For a moment, the car seemed to stop in mid-street. Monica pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling before shame could stop them. Abby leaned back, hearing in her chest her grandfather's voice from another night. Honor is the only thing you keep when everything else breaks. Tonight, Kenji said, his voice low, as if making a vow in business. I said enough upstairs. To you, I say something else. My family has owed yours for more than 70 years. That debt is not paid in words. He closed the wallet, tucking the photo back over his heart like a sentinel. I will take you home. Tomorrow my aide will call. At the very least, I want to ensure that from tonight on, you never work under a roof like that again. You don't need to. Monica stammered, her voice shaking. We're fine. I'll find another job. Not tonight. Kenji repeated, a small smile brushing his lips. Tonight I am family. The car turned into a narrow street, windows glowing warm above them like friendly eyes. Monica pointed that building. At the entrance, the security guard looked up as the black car pulled in. Curtains shifted in neighborly curiosity. The driver opened the door, bowing. Kenji stepped out upright as ritual, then turned to Monica and Abby. I want to walk you to the door. It wasn't gallantry, it was the gravity of a man who kept his word. In the hallway, the tube lights hummed faintly. Abby unlocked the peeling door. The small apartment greeted them with cheap soap and lingering damp. Thank you, Monica said, clear and full this time. Kenji handed her a card. Tomorrow at 9, a woman named Emmy will call. Please take it. I believe you'll find life easier after that. He bowed deeper to Abby. You saved many people from a lie written in ink. Your grandfather would be proud. When the door shut, Monica leaned back, laughter breaking through before dissolving into tears. Abby wrapped her arms around her, feeling her mother's back tremble, not with fever this time, but with release. Outside, the black car pulled away, light as a comma, closing the longest sentence of a day too full of words. On the small table lay the book of Japanese folk tales, like a map that had carried them across a glass room. Abby opened a page, her finger gliding over the paper as if touching a blessing sent from far away. Those who choose honor do not do so because they know they will win, but because they refuse to lose themselves. She closed her eyes, saw Walter smiling in the kitchen corner, heard the spoon stirring soup, heard Kenji's pen click shut, heard her own 4 words erupt quietly in the glass penthouse. That's not what it says. And for the first time in a long year, she slept without dreaming of endless hallways with no exit. Morning would come quickly, and tomorrow the phone would ring. At exactly 9 o'clock, the phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number lit up the screen, and the name Emmy appeared as Monica swiped to answer. A calm, courteous female voice, paced just slowly enough not to overwhelm, said, "Good morning, Mrs. Riley. I'm Emmy, Mr. Tanaka's assistant. I'm calling to confirm a few things he instructed." "Yes," Monica answered, feeling as if she were standing before a door she had knocked on for years, but never opened. Emmy didn't recite terms. She explained step by step in simple sentences. The first account clears your debts and secures living expenses. The second is an educational trust in the name of Abigail Riley, covering tuition and learning costs from high school through college and beyond if needed. Rent for the first 6 months has been paid on an apartment we secured for you in a safe neighborhood near a park and a good school. Utilities and internet will be transferred into your name today. And this is your new phone number. We've registered it to shield you from harassing calls. On the other end, Monica sank to the edge of the bed. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Emmy smiled, you could hear it in her voice. You only need to say received. The rest, focus on being a mother." The words made Monica laugh through her tears. "Yes, I've received." 3 days later, a small moving truck pulled up to the new building. White framed windows, fresh painted railings, hallways smelling faintly of polished wood. Abby carried a light box of books, Monica a bundle of dishes wrapped in newspaper. In the living room, a green armchair sat by the window facing an oak tree. "For Grandpa," Abby said. Monica nodded, stroking the fabric. In the kitchen, a pot of soup simmered again, and the smell of toasted bread was unmistakably the smell of home. On the 4th day, Emmy visited carrying a stack of hardbound books, Kawabata, Akutagawa, Dazai English translations printed alongside Japanese text. From Mr. Tanaka, she told Abby. He said, "Read slowly." Abby hugged the books. "Emmy," she stammered, "thank you for everything." Emmy shook her head. "Thank you for those 4 words." Meanwhile, across the city, Blackwell Global began to hear steel groaning inside its glass shell. Grant sat in a closed boardroom, a line of lawyers before him. On the screen, the stock chart flickered like an arrhythmic heartbeat. Kenji had issued a formal notice withdrawal from the $2 billion deal due to ethical violations, all communication now through legal channels. By noon, a young reporter at the Chicago Financial Times received a tip. Look at the bilingual contract. The article went live. Wednesday morning, English and Japanese texts, side by side, 4 phrases highlighted. The only cited source an unexpected reader of Japanese. The effect was instant. The stock graph plunged like a sheet of ice breaking. Within a single session, Blackwell shares collapsed. Those who once swore loyalty withdrew their messages faster than they had sent congratulations. At the Glass estate, Victoria was stripped from 2 charity boards by cold, curt emails. Chase messaged his circle of friends. Scene appeared, but no replies. Invitations to galas evaporated like mist on a dry day. The name Blackwell was now chained to dangerous phrases, attempted fraud-doctored translation ethics breach. Elevator doors opened, but there was nowhere left to go. That evening, Abby sat in the green armchair opening Prayer at the Mountain by Kawabata. Monica set 2 bowls of soup on the table, bread still steaming. "You okay? I'm okay." Abby smiled. "I think Grandpa is sitting right here." She pointed to the empty space across from her. Monica sat down, gazed at the emptiness for a second, then nodded slowly. The phone buzzed. Kenji called. "Abby," his voice still deep and warm. "Emmy said you got the books." "Yes, sir. Read slowly. And don't forget, Joy." He paused a beat. "One more thing, the day after tomorrow, I'll come by. I want to take you and your mother somewhere. A place with rows of white stones." After the call, Monica placed her hand over her daughter's. "Do you want to go, yes?" Abby answered. She knew the place was a military cemetery. And she knew that on that hill the wind would carry a different scent, the scent of a circle finally closing. Night fell on the new neighborhood. In the kitchen, the soup pot was off. In the living room, warm lamplight draped over the green chair, the new books, the 2 steaming bowls. Across the city, red and green screens flickered a name falling. Here, 2 other names, Walter and Satoru, were being spoken again in a warm voice. And all Abby had to do now was read slowly and sleep in peace. The morning of the visit dawned so clear the thin clouds looked like chalk smudges. The black car slid out of the city and climbed uphill, leaving behind the horns and glass-lit streaks. The road into the military cemetery stretched wide and hushed, as if keeping a secret for all who rested there. Rows of white headstones stood in perfect lines, spaced evenly like steady breaths. Kenji Tanaka asked the driver to park farther away. He spoke quietly to Monica. "We'll walk this part. not as ceremony just to give the words ahead a place to land. Abby walked between the two adults, clutching her backpack to her chest. Inside were her book of Japanese folk tales and a slip of paper scrawled in pencil with kanji her grandfather had once made her copy again and again. Hilltop wines carried the scent of cut grass. Sunlight brushed the stone tracing fine veins. Kenji stopped at a grave, engraved simply and clearly, Walter Riley. He bowed low, the way his grandfather Satoru had taught him as a boy. When you owe a debt, let your forehead near the earth. "Your grandfather is here," Monica said, her voice breaking as she froze in place. Abby set down a bundle of white chrysanthemums at the base of the stone, touching the carved name with her fingertips. She whispered, "Hi, Grandpa." The wind slipped through her braids, lifting the faint scent of coconut oil. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Before her was a name that had led her through the long corridor of the glass penthouse that night, through the words he'd left behind. Kenji stood beside her fingers, brushing the edge of his wallet by habit. He drew out the black and white photo. "I promised not to open this in that house," he said, placing it on the headstone and holding it down with one finger. "Here it's allowed." The picture was unchanged, the dusty-faced American soldier with kind eyes, the gaunt Japanese student with hollow ones. Their smiles were faint but without fear. Satoru told my father, and my father told me, "If you meet an American with the name Riley, treat him as family." Kenji lifted his gaze to Abby's dark brown eyes. "I keep that promise." They sat on a bench opposite the grave. Kenji opened his wallet again, pulling out a weathered envelope. "Years ago, my grandfather wrote a letter through Veterans Networks asking after Walter Riley." No reply. Perhaps the address changed, perhaps the letter was lost. He died before he could say thank you. Kenji laid the letter flat on the bench, smoothing its wrinkles. "Last night I understood why he carried the photo until the end. Not because of war, but because of peace. Because of one man." Abby looked at the letter like it was a bridge across time. "Would your grandfather be happy to meet me?" she asked softly. Kenji smiled so gently the wind seemed to ease. "Very happy." He pressed his palm to the stone for a moment. "Walter, thank you. I keep Satoru's word." Then he turned to Monica and Abby. "About education, the Tanaka Foundation has established a trust for Abigail Riley. Any school anywhere, full tuition, books, housing, and a stipend so Mrs. Riley doesn't trade sleep for bills." He paused, letting them breathe with his words. "This is not a gift, it is repayment, a debt of honor." "You have done too much," Monica said, shaking her head, eyes reddened. "We just want peace." Kenji nodded, "Then accept it for peace. You owe me nothing. You owe the girl who saved many from a lie in ink. And I owe Walter." He scribbled a note on the back of his card, Emmy's number, a meeting with an academic advisor, a school tour. "We begin by reading slowly," he told Abby. "Read, but keep joy." They stayed a few more minutes. Birds chirped somewhere distant. Cars drifted past on a far road. Abby sat cross-legged, pulling her folktale book from her bag. She read a few lines aloud, her tongue striking the places her grandfather had once corrected the name of a mountain, a river, a man. Kenji listened as if to a folk song from his own homeland. "Beautiful sound," he murmured. "Kanji are pictures. Voice is breath. You have both." Before leaving, Abby took out her pencil, and with Kenji's nod wrote 2 small characters on the back of the photo, "Arigato arigato." She handed the picture back into his wallet, folding it shut like sealing a memory. Monica wiped her face, inhaled deeply. "All right," she said with a small smile Abby hadn't seen in a long time. "Let's get lunch." They stopped at a modest ramen shop, its glass fogged with steam. Kenji ordered shoyu ramen Abby miso Monica udon. When the bowls arrived, Kenji lifted his chopsticks and bowed slightly itadakimasu. Abby followed Monica, smiled, and echoed. They ate in the quiet that only exists when people truly trust one another. Kenji told how his grandfather Satoru loved Basho's poetry. Abby shared how her grandfather Walter loved peppermint candy. Monica added small stories from the new neighborhood, the kind security guard the dark green oak tree the park swings. In the afternoon, they visited the nearby high school. The principal shook hands firmly. Miss Riley, she said, will arrange placement tests for advanced language skills, especially Japanese. Kenji stepped back, leaving space for mother and daughter to speak. Abby walked down the hallway, brushing her hand over her new locker. She thought of the glass corridors at the Blackwell estate light with no refuge. Here, the scent of paper markers and plastic lockers felt safe, like a promise. By evening, Kenji drove them home. At the building's entrance, Monica turned back. I don't know how I could ever repay this. Kenji smiled. You don't. Repayment goes forward. One day, when Abby is strong and skilled, if she meets someone weaker, speak truth for them. That's enough. He bowed, hand over his chest where the wallet lay. Walter did it. I carry it on. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Abby tilted her head at the white lobby ceiling, the familiar buzzing light above. She thought of those 4 words that night, the photo that morning, the ramen at lunch. Then she thought of one short, difficult word, honor. It wasn't loud, didn't photograph well, didn't shine gold. It simply stood there, waiting for people to choose it. Night fell. In the green armchair, Abby opened a book of Akutagawa stories Kenji had given her. Monica set down a warm glass of milk beside her. Hey, her mother said, half teasing, half serious, when that scholarship comes through, you better let me sign something. Abby laughed. You can sign the whole library. Their laughter rolled through the little apartment like marbles tumbling under a bed. And somewhere, Walter and Satoru were surely nodding. News spread like water rushing through a crack in stone. First a trickle, then a flood. The Chicago Financial Times ran the bilingual comparison. Trade journals picked it up, layering on charts and timelines. Withdrawal from $2 billion deal. Over ethical violations, the phrase stuck like a stamp across Blackwell Global's forehead. Thursday morning, the board convened an emergency session. Grant walked in to find faces that once smiled over champagne now set like granite. Lawyers slid a list in front of him what to do immediately and what not to say under any circumstance. He nodded, then forgot as soon as he left the room. By noon, Victoria received 3 emails stripping her name from 2 nonprofit boards. Her phone lit up with missed calls from old friends not to check on her, but to measure how far the family had fallen. Chase typed into the Arcadia Boys group chat weekend party still on. On the screen, the word "seen" stacked in a cold row. He logged out, slumped in a chair, staring at the street through glass as flat as aquarium water. That afternoon, Ethan Clark entered an interrogation room in another glass tower. He placed his phone and laptop on the table, sliding his passwords to 2 officials he couldn't look in the eye. He recounted everything: the call, the $20,000 transfer, the minor adjustment, the belief that the Japanese side would read the English. By the time he stood, the sweat on his back had dried, leaving salt lines on his shirt. The woman across the table closed her notebook. Thank you, Mr. Clark. You'll receive your next summons, and you might want to take some time off. He nodded. Outside, the wind slapped his face like a hand, but woke him. That evening, reporters gathered outside the glass estate. Grant appeared on the steps, reading a self-written statement unchecked about translation misunderstandings and shareholder value. By the 3rd sentence, Victoria yanked the microphone. Stop. Lawyers only. She dragged Grant inside, slamming the door. From behind a curtain, Chase watched the flashes burst like offshore lightning. The next morning, Abby started at her new school. Hallways buzzed with marker ink sneaker squeaks, locker doors clanging. The principal met her at the advanced literature classroom, whispering, "We'll design a special track for your Japanese studies, all right?" Abby nodded. A short-haired girl turned. "Hi, Abby. I'm Maya." A boy in a baseball cap waved Ethan. No, Eli. "Oops." The class laughed, short round laughter, the kind that doesn't cut. Abby exhaled, shoulders lighter by an inch. At midday, Monica stopped by the neighborhood market picking up bread, eggs, greens. At checkout, she noticed a flyer for part-time library shifts. She texted Emmy, "I'd like to apply for a few morning shifts there." The reply came instantly. "Perfect. I'll contact the library. The foundation will continue covering expenses. This job is for joy, not for money." Monica smiled. For joy, 2 new words. That night, Kenji called as promised. "Tomorrow I'll visit," he said. "There's something I want to give in person." The next morning he arrived with a small wooden box. Inside lay a black-bodied fountain pen, its steel nib gleaming. Satoru used this kind, he said. He believed pens remind the writer to go slowly. Abby lifted it like a breath. "Thank you, sir." Kenji sat by the green armchair gazing at the oak outside. "I have a request once a month. Write me a letter in Japanese about one thing you've learned." "I'll reply." "Not homework, just letters." "Yes," Abby said. She already thought of things to share. Maya liked skateboarding. Eli hated math homework. The principal smiled before every recess. Monica was choosing curtains for the kitchen window. Small things, but alive once written. Meanwhile, the landslide at the Blackwell house rolled on. Law firms drafted papers. A letter demanding explanation from a regulatory committee dropped into their inbox. Grant paced the mansion, counting steps on an Italian rug scrubbed of champagne stains. Everything looked the same, but it was hollow. Victoria, in another room, rehearsed an apology speech she would never release. Chase sat in his gaming room, controller in hand, unplugged. They shouted at each other loudly, but none of it reached. The house, once proud of its glass, could no longer reflect a single, decent image. A week later, Abby sent her first letter to Kenji. She wrote slowly, letting the nib carve each kanji, which page of Kawabata she had reached, how Maya taught her to turn a skateboard, how Monica said the new kitchen felt like a friend, and how she no longer hunched her shoulders at her locker. At the end, she added, "Grandpa would like the oak tree." She pressed a dried leaf into the envelope. At night, the city still glowed, but their windows stayed open a little longer for laughter. Monica tested a new bread recipe flour, pattering like light rain on the table. Abby practiced her opening line with the new pen, "Dear Mr. Kenji." The ink sank clean into the paper, no smudge. She thought again of those 4 words now, no longer an explosion, but like 4 notes in a song she had learned by heart. That's not what it says. No longer a blast, now a rhythm she would carry to strike once, whenever the world needed resetting. Somewhere across town, the great door of the Blackwell mansion swung open. Grant stepped out, faced the cameras again. He said nothing. Perhaps for the first time he understood there are things numbers cannot say. He turned back and closed the door. The evening news was brief. $2 billion deal collapses. Blackwell Global faces investor exodus. The headline scrolled across the screen, then disappeared. And here another line was being written. Abby Riley traced the kanji for honor. Ming Yu slowly, each stroke deliberate. She placed the final dot, then looked up at Monica smiling in the kitchen. The kitchen glowed. The oak stood steady. The curtain swayed with the breeze. And a story had turned not by money, but by a single truth spoken at the right time. The months flowed like a small river, never rushing, never still. Abby grew used to the bell of her new school, to the way Maya called her prof whenever a kanji peeked out from the margin of an essay, to Eli's constant frown at equations he always solved anyway. Monica wore a pale blue sweater to the neighborhood library where she worked 3 mornings a week. The job was light shelving books, pointing directions, labeling reading stories aloud to children at story hour. But among shelves scented with paper and dust, Monica's heart felt lighter in a way it never had in mirrored living rooms. One day, Emmy set a slim box on the librarian's counter. "From Mr. Tanaka," she said. Inside was a reprinted black and white photograph framed in wood, engraved with 2 small lines, "Walter and Satoru," and "Room of Honor." Beneath lay a note the Tanaka Foundation would sponsor a new reading corner, 1 glass cabinet, a few new shelves, and a wall panel telling the story of 2 young men who once shared a broken wall in Okinawa. Monica touched the frame as though pressing open a new window in the old wall of the neighborhood. She wrote Kenji a thank you letter by hand, short sentences Emmy had taught her, no ornament, only truth. The reading corner opened on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Children dashed around with stickers of paper fans. Abby stood on a small platform and read a slow passage from Kawabata in bilingual text. Elderly women in the front row nodded as if hearing an old friend's tale. Kenji was there, gray coat, a red maple leaf pin on his lapel. When Abby finished, he clapped in a steady rhythm, eyes glistening. On the wall, the framed photo now hung beside a small plaque, "Room of Honor." After the reading, a man lingered outside the glass doors before stepping in. Crisp shirt a wrinkle across the back hair, slightly undone hands unsure where to rest. Ethan Clark. He stopped a few steps from Kenji. "Mr. Tanaka," he rasped, "I came to apologize in person." Kenji turned, nodded slightly. No embrace, no instant forgiveness. Just a nod granting another man the chance to start again at the hardest point, setting foot where he once fell. Ethan turned to Monica and Abby. "I owe you both an apology. I sold what should have been kept." He drew a thin envelope from his pocket. Monica shook her head instantly, instinctively pushing trouble away. But Ethan said quietly, "Not money. A letter." Inside was a page. He explained how he had surrendered his devices, cooperated fully, and accepted suspension from the Translators Guild. He asked permission to volunteer at the new corner, teaching a free ethics workshop every Wednesday night for anyone who worked as a bridge between languages. If you find it acceptable," he said, eyes not daring to hold theirs. Kenji looked at the photo on the wall, then back at Ethan. "You cannot absolve yourself, but you can work through what you've done." He turned to Monica. She bit her lip, then gave a short nod. "Wednesday night," she said. Ethan bowed like a man handed a thin rope across a chasm. On Wednesdays, the Room of Honor glowed later. A group of all ages sat before a whiteboard, listening to Ethan speak about the borders of words, how phrases shifted weight with culture, and intent, what must never be done when standing between 2 shores. Abby sat in the second row, taking notes with the black fountain pen Kenji had given her, her strokes neat as her upright posture. Sometimes Kenji came too, sitting quietly in the back row, smiling faintly when Ethan paused at a hard spot and admitted, "This is where I once failed to stop." At school, Abby joined the debate team, volunteering to interpret for an exchange with a Japanese language club. Before the event, a group of boys from another team mocked her, "Hey, say something in Japanese." Abby looked at them as if through a display case, not angry, just unwilling to waste time. When the exchange began, she stood between the 2 groups, translating smoothly as water-adjusting rhythm, when one voice ran ahead, pulling the other to catch up. At the end, one of the mocking boys shuffled over, mumbling, "We said dumb things. Sorry." She nodded lightly, not punishing anyone. The bridge was built. Whoever chose could cross. News about Blackwell rose and fell like tides board, reshuffles lawsuits, stacking photos of Grant before cameras with a face that had forgotten where to place a smile. One evening, the local news aired a short segment on translation ethics in the city. Ethan appeared for a few seconds, standing at the room of honor, saying simply, "A bridge is not only for others to cross, it keeps you from falling." Those who knew the story pressed their lips tight. Those who didn't still nodded. Emmy texted Kenji the link with a maple leaf emoji. Abby kept sending monthly letters in Japanese. The third told of Maya scraping her knee but laughing of Eli finally removing his cap in class after the teacher's third reminder of Monica choosing honey yellow curtains for the kitchen because the sunlight will like it. The fourth carried a pressed oak leaf, glossy as thin glass. Kenji answered faithfully, describing his rooftop rock garden, a miso soup he'd tried and failed to match his mother's, and a basho haiku he'd carried for life. An old pond, a frog leaps in, sound of water. He wrote beneath short, like your 4 words. By late autumn, the Room of Honor hosted a small evening reading. More people came than expected. Extra chairs were set out. Monica baked waffles at home, brought them on a tray beside a pot of hot tea. Abby read the closing lines of an Akutagawa story. When she shut the book, a round warm applause filled the room. Kenji rose, speaking briefly. In a glass room, 4 words saved a life from ink. In this room of books, every word saves us from losing our way. He bowed. On the wall, Walter and Satoru smiled in their photo. That night at home, Monica opened the kitchen window. Cold air swept through the yellow curtains, brushing the green armchair where Abby was writing her 5th letter with the fountain pen. Black ink flowed smoothly on white paper. At the last line, she paused, then wrote, "Ming yu ha jing kani litteru." Honor stands quietly. She tapped the nib, set the pen down. Outside the window, the oak murmured as if agreeing. Winter passed, like a courteous guest, arriving on time, staying just enough, leaving without noise. Abby turned 13, wearing a slim black coat, her braids grown longer, crossing a schoolyard less muddy than before. Monica grew confident with the library's catalog system, her hands no longer fumbling on the keyboard. Ethan finished his first volunteer cycle and began a second with even more attendees. Kenji traveled back and forth like a tireless swallow each visit, carrying a small gift, an embroidered bookmark, a packet of sencha, a thin book of poems. One early summer day, Emmy called the Tanaka Foundation is hosting its annual scholarship night. Mr. Tanaka would like Abby to give a short speech. No names, no companies, just about words. Abby swallowed. Kenji said, then hung up and looked at Monica. Her mother nodded the way she had so many times before. Speak the way you read, true and slow. That night the hall wasn't large but warm. Kenji opened with a few figures about the education trust this year. 12 new full scholarships, 9 partials and several living stipends for working families like Monica's once had been. He spoke briefly, then stepped backstage. Emmy introduced Abby with the fewest adjectives possible. Abby walked out surprised that the golden lights no longer stung her eyes. "My name is Abby Riley," she began, her English clear. "I'm here to talk about 4 words. That's not what it says." A ripple passed through the seats. There are rooms where people want you silent. But words aren't silent. Words stand there true or false depending on us. I learned Japanese from my grandfather not to show off, but to understand. That night I only read what was written. Powerful people said it was a small matter. But small things can swallow $2 billion and swallow you if you let them. She paused, seeing Monica's hand pressed to her chest. Kenji sitting upright, eyes like when he faced the white gravestone. I thank the foundation for helping my mother and me at the right moment. But I want to accept this scholarship as a promise. When I read a language, I'll guard the honor of the words. When I translate, I won't sell the bridge I stand on. And when I see something wrong, I'll speak at the right time." She bowed. Applause rose not loud, but full and unbroken. Afterward, a Latina girl touched Abby's hand. "I want to learn Japanese too. Can you show me where to start?" Abby smiled and pulled a folded sheet from her bag, the alphabet chart and a few links. "Start with hiragana. Don't rush," she said, feeling like she had just turned a mirror so someone else could see their own face. News of Blackwell drifted from front pages to the back columns. Preliminary settlements, board, reshuffles, calls for restructuring. Grant appeared once more in a blurry photo entering a courthouse with a heavy briefcase. Victoria had no boards left to flaunt. People said she had taken up gardening. Chase posted a picture of a new cactus. Comments were sparse. One evening, Monica turned off the TV mid-report and told Abby, "We know enough." Abby nodded. Some stories closed with legal papers. Theirs closed with a green armchair, yellow curtains, and monthly letters. Autumn came again, the oak leaves turning color. At the room of honor, Ethan closed his third course. He stopped calling himself the one who failed and began calling himself the bridge keeper. He no longer begged forgiveness. He worked. A group of language students listened, their eyes bright as glass. Kenji stood in the back, smiling a smile Ethan never would have dared to imagine that first day. One afternoon, Kenji came by. "Let's go for a walk." They stopped at the cemetery. The sky was so clear, birdsong sounded like water. Abby laid white chrysanthemums. Monica stepped back to give her space. Kenji pulled a thin envelope from his wallet, a sharper reprint of the photo with words on the back in Japanese and English. "Because a stranger treated me like family." He handed it to Abby. "This one belongs to you." She held it with both hands as if cradling a compass. On the way back, they stopped at the ramen shop again. Kenji ordered shoyu Monica her udon. Abby tried tsukemen for the first time. They blessed the meal softly with itadakimasu. Kenji looked at Abby. "Where will you choose to study?" She smiled. "I don't know yet, but I know I'll keep writing you every month even when I'm busy." He laughed gently. That night, Abby sat in the green armchair notebook, opened the fountain pen warm in her hand. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Kenji, this month, I learned a small thing. The kanji for honor doesn't shine on its own. It shines when you stand beside it long enough, true enough." She added stories about Maya practicing a hard skateboard jump, Eli finally admitting he liked math if the teacher didn't shout about Monica, guiding an old woman to the poetry shelf, and both laughing and crying over a basho verse. She closed with "Thank you for letting me keep my bridge." She folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope tucked in a newly pressed oak leaf. Monica came from the kitchen with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Finished, finished." They clinked mugs, the steam warming their cheeks. At the window, the yellow curtain swayed. Outside, the city breathed. Inside, the kitchen glowed. And if anyone asked Abby Riley where her story ended, she would say it doesn't. It begins again each time she opens a letter, each time her pen touches paper, each time some girl dares to speak 4 words in a room that wants her silent. That's not what it says. Those words are not a weapon. They are a heartbeat, a reminder that there is a way to live without selling your bridge, without using words to blind, but to guide. And from the green armchair by the oak window, that road stretches so wide it needs no compass. She already has 2 names carved in stone to set her direction. She already has a photograph to remind her why. She already has a pen to write the rest. From a glass penthouse to a small room of honor in a neighborhood library, Abby Riley's story reminds us that the greatest power is not money or titles, but 4 words spoken at the right time, That's not what it says. A 12-year-old girl, an old photo from Okinawa, and a promise between two families overturned a $2 billion deal and rebuilt a bridge called Honor for others to cross. And if one day you find yourself in a room where silence is demanded in front of a hidden clause, a polished lie will you speak for truth and for honor. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss the journeys to come.